We're good. Please rise as you are able. I now call this meeting of Barrie City Council to order.
We acknowledge that this meeting is taking place in the traditional land of the Anishinaabe people. The Anishinaabe include the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. We're dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. You may be seated. Welcome everyone to our virtual City Council meeting. I want to remind everyone that due to the COVID-19 ongoing pandemic, City Council is continuing to practice physical distancing. Members of Council, the Executive Management Team, and Deputy City Clerk are participating via video conference. Members of the Senior Leadership Team that have items on tonight's agenda are not visible, but are available to answer any questions. Before I get started with the business agenda tonight, I wanted to recognize the passing of a pillar of our community. Mr. Al McNair passed away on September the 14th. Al had a number of roles in our community and indeed in support of what we do here at the city. He was a staunch environmental advocate and was co-owner of McNair Planning and Development. He was a lifetime urban planner and was incredibly passionate about protecting natural environments and wildlife in the city of Barrie. He was a longtime member of the Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition, conservation chair of Nature Barrie, an author, fine musical performer. You could see him on stage with Kempenfelt Community Players and had a role with Theatre by the Bay. Al was instrumental in a multitude of projects over the years for the city and was a knowledgeable resource as a member of the Environmental Advisory Committee for 8 years and most recently member of the Active Transportation and Sustainability Advisory Committee. His favorite song was Big Yellow Taxi, and one of those lines is, "You don't know what you got till it's gone." I expect we are not going to realize just how big this man's contribution was to our city until now that he's gone. We will surely miss him, and thank you to Al in memoriam for all of your service to the city of Barrie. Rogers is not carrying tonight's council meeting due to the federal election, but we are streaming on the City of Barrie's YouTube channel tonight. And that will bring us to our, with that, I'll get to our first item on the business agenda, which is confirmation of the minutes. First item is the minutes from August 9th, 2021, and also August 30th, 2021. So the minutes of the City Council meeting held August 9th, 2021 and August 30th, 2021 have been circulated. Are there any corrections to those minutes? Okay, seeing none, they're adopted as printed and circulated. We have no awards and recognition or report from officers tonight. We do have an emergency deputation request from the General Committee report from last week, and that emergency deputation request is from Kathy Colbatch concerning motion 21G 218 related to the restoration and donation of historic train engine 1531. I do need a vote in favor to allow the emergency deputation. So I will call the question. Can I see a show of hands? Those in favor of allowing the deputation? Unanimous. So I will call on Kathy Kolbach to deliver her deputation. Ms. Kolbach, although you are no stranger to City Council, I'll remind you again, you have a maximum of 5 minutes for your deputy, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman and members of council. I would like to speak to you briefly this evening with regard to Engine 1531. And first, I would like to thank staff in Economic and Creative Development for the long-awaited staff report, and to Councillors Jim Harris and Claire Rietma for creating the amendment referring staff report ECD 00421 back to staff so we may explore the possibility of another option. And thank you, Council, for your support in this matter. We have a potential opportunity to work collectively as a county, city, and community together to bring a heritage vision to Allendale. This is an opportunity to elevate heritage tourism in Barrie. Heritage Barrie attended almost every open-air Dunlop event this summer with lots of visitors to our tent. We've added homes to the register, chatted with business owners, provided heritage walking tours via the town crier, and handed out hundreds of self-guided walking tours. In chatting with visitors, we learned of folks who came from Guelph for 3-day visits and stayed at B&Bs in Innisfil, another couple who took the train from Toronto and joined the walking tour. The walking tours were well attended, averaging 10 to 14 persons per tour over the 5 or 6 weekends. Pre-COVID, during our last Celebrate Barrie event, which seems like forever, I think that was in 2019, on the Allendale Neighborhood Association table, we had a Bring Back Engine 1531 petition on our table and quickly had over 300 signatures. People were excited to talk trains, both locomotive and GO trains. In fact, we have handed out over 1,300 paper trains to children over the years. Engine 1531 is an asset to the city of Barrie and could be a valuable asset to tourism Barrie. We have many schools, some of whom are within walking distance to where the potential train could go in Allendale, as well as the many visitors to our city along the waterfront. Imagine for a moment the number of residents alone who would come to visit. Another draw to our beautiful city. Let's not forget the history of Allendale and the importance of the first rail to come from Toronto to Allendale circa 1850. In fact, it built our neighborhood. The historic train station has been designated by our council and province. Our waterfront area in Allendale was the original resting place for locomotives of the day. We also have the bronze bust of Frederick Cumberland near the South Shore Community Centre, erected by the men of the Northern and Northwestern Railway, 1881. So we really do have the ability to create a heritage landmark area or conservation district. Don't forget our other landmark buildings in this area. The farmhouse, which is the YMCA circa 1907, where the railway workers stayed. Number 4 Essa Road, circa 1896, which was the former Fisher Brothers Brewery, for those who don't know. Later was Doc Patterson's Pharmacy. 8 Essa Road, Webb's Jeweler. Wesley Webb provided watch inspection for the railway workers, and the South Shore Centre, as it was the master mechanic's office. Allendale has also become a major transportation and mobility hub. GO Metrolinx, Barrie Transit, and other bus lines are serviced through this area. All great opportunities for heritage tourism. The one item I would ask of council is, what is the timeline around the new staff report? When will it come back to council? I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kolbach, for your deputation. Any questions of the deputant, members of City Council? Okay, seeing none, thank you again, Kathy, as always, for being here and for your advocacy for heritage in our community. We will be getting to that matter very, very shortly. But first, we need to deal with a tax application. Deputy Mayor Ward, you have a motion regarding tax applications.
By myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that the list of applications for cancellation, reduction, or addition to taxes to council dated September 20th, 2021, submitted by the Treasurer in the amount of $99,412.75 be approved.
Thank you. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that the list of applications for cancellation, reduction, or additions to taxes to council dated September 20th, submitted by the treasurer in the amount of $99,412.75 be approved. As we're doing this virtually, I will ask the deputy clerk, have we received any objections to this list of applications or application for cancellation, reduction, or additions of taxes?
No, Mayor Lieben, the clerk's office has not received any notices.
Okay. Any comments or questions from members of council? Okay, seeing none, I'll take the vote. Those in favor? Is anyone opposed? None. That carries unanimously. Thank you, council. Okay, and that takes us to the committee reports. Deputy Mayor Ward, I believe you have the motions.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section A of the General Committee Report dated September 13th, 2021, as circulated, to be adopted.
Thank you. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section A of the General Committee Report dated September 13th, 2021, as circulated, be adopted. These items are the business plan status, the quarterly report for June 30th, 2021, the agreement with SIVA Creative to provide website support for the Anti-Racism Task Force, and the invitation to Georgian College to come make a presentation to council. Those were consent items last week. Any comments or questions on Section A? Seeing none, those in favor of Section A, please indicate. Anybody opposed? None. That carries. Section B, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section B of the General Committee Report dated September 13th, 2021, as circulated, be adopted.
Thank you. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section B of the General Committee Report dated September 13th, 2021, as circulated, be adopted. This is the restoration and donation of the historic train engine 1531, as amended by council last week. Does anyone wish to speak to this item? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. The motion is on the floor. Those in favor, please indicate. Anyone opposed? None. That is unanimous. And since that was the subject of the deputation, I'll just note that that motion would indeed send the matter to Heritage Barrie per Councillor Jim Harris's motion last week, amendment to the motion last week. Okay. Sorry, I guess we're on Section C now. Deputy Mayor Ward, go ahead.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section C of the General Committee Report dated September 13th, 2021, as circulated, be adopted.
Thank you. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section C of the General Committee Report dated September 13th, 2021, as circulated, be adopted. This is the motion regarding Tourism Barrie and the City of Barrie's MAT collection agreement, the Municipal Accommodation Tax Collection Agreement renewal. Comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, those in favor of Section C, please indicate. Anybody opposed? None. That carries. Section D, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section D of the General Committee Report dated September 13th, 2021, as circulated, be adopted.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section D of the General Committee Report dated September 13th, 2021, as circulated, be adopted. This is the Tourism Master Plan Implementation Program. Comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll just note, because I hate to see such significant pieces of work go by without any note, I just wanted to note the significance of this piece of work. The Tourism Master Plan has been in the making since before COVID, certainly has been adapted to look at what will be effective in terms of helping recover from COVID. But there's a significant number of people in our community who contributed to this. But of course, it was led by our very own Invest Barrie and Ms. Schlichter and her team, and a lot of work to consult with the industry and come forward with this, which is the action plan. So for those in our community who might be interested in the strategy, there's a first piece. This is the second piece, and which may be very interesting to those who are in related industries, because this is specifically the action plans and the implementation program that we will be pursuing to try and support the hospitality, tourism, and related sectors as it comes out of COVID. So I'll call the question on Section D. Those in favor of Section D, please. And none opposed, that carries. Thank you, members of council. Section E, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section E of the General Committee Report dated September 13th, 2021, as circulated, be adopted.
Thank you. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section E of the General Committee Report dated September 13th, 2021 is circulated, be adopted. This is with regards to payday loan establishments along Dunlop Street. Comments or questions on Section E? Seeing none, those in favor of Section E? None opposed. That carries unanimously. Section F, please. Oh, nope, we're done. There's no Section F. Just seeing if you were paying attention, Deputy Mayor Ward. Thank you very much, members of council. We do, however, have a direct motion. And I will actually ask Deputy Mayor Ward to assume the chair since I had put this item on.
Okay. Mayor Lehman,
thank you.
would you like to introduce your motion?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ward. It's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that the Mayor's office on behalf of the City of Barrie provide a letter of support for the Mars Smart City Center's application to the FCM Green Municipal Fund to undertake a feasibility study for a municipal infrastructure investment fund.
Thank you. The motion is that the Mayor's office be on behalf of the City of Barrie provide a letter of support to the Mars Smart City Center's application for the FCM's Green Municipal Fund to undertake a feasibility study for a municipal infrastructure investment fund. Mayor Lehman, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, I'm not going to give a long speech for this because it's just a letter of support for a grant application. If Mars is successful, then Barrie might participate in this through a pilot program. But the short version of this is that Mars has been doing wonderful work with the City of Victoria and a few other municipalities as well as myself. They asked me to join an advisory board, trying to put together a fund similar to the UK's Mayor's Climate Change Fund, the Mayor of London, UK, which has leveraged about a 10x investment by private impact investors, private sector capital, for things like building retrofits and transportation improvements, electrification projects, and so forth to address climate change. Mars is trying to do something similar here. They're applying to the Green Fund to get a grant to conduct a feasibility study, and they've looked for some municipalities to partner with. So I will have more to say on this if they are successful, but they were looking for a letter of support from a number of municipalities that might participate. And I didn't want to do that without asking you if that was all right, Council, but typically a letter of support for a grant is a minor matter. So put this on as a direct motion today. It's on as a direct motion because unfortunately the grant application is due in about a week. So the time sensitivity crept up on me a little. So that's what is behind this item. This
Okay,
direct motion.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? And I'm in favor as well. It's unanimous. I'll turn the chair back to you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Ward. Completes the direct motions tonight, which brings us to our presentation. And I'm glad that we haven't kept Dr. Mike Moffatt waiting, because I imagine there are probably a number of others later this evening as the election results start to take over media and asking about his opinions, as many people in this country seek Dr. Moffatt's opinions on some very important issues, and housing probably high on that list of issues that Mike has become very much an expert on in Ontario, and was well before COVID, but particularly in the last 2 years. Dr. Moffatt is the Senior Director of Policy at the Smart Prosperity Institute, and an assistant professor in the Business Economics Public Policy Group at the Ivey Business School at Western University. Mike was previously Chief Innovation Fellow for the Government of Canada, advising deputy ministers on innovation policy and emerging trends. He has worked with politicians and policymakers of all political stripes in several countries to craft more effective public policy. And any of you who follow Dr. Moffatt on Twitter will know that he has been extremely active all the way through the pandemic, advocating for solutions to the housing crisis that affects our country. But I think coming from a point of sort of root cause information, looking at why we're in a housing crisis, how we've ended up here, and how we might play the long game to get ourselves out of it, both as a country, a province, and as local municipalities. I've had the very good fortune of working with Dr. Moffatt off and on a few different things, and being on his podcast, and I know him to be a very, very knowledgeable commentator. So it's a pleasure. Councillor Morales invited Dr. Moffatt here today. I'm so glad he did. Thank you for that, Sergio. And Mike, welcome to Barrie City Council.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for that kind introduction. Hope that doesn't eat too much into my speaking time. So I will get right to it and present some research that we're publishing later this month. So we're trying to figure out basically two questions: what the heck happened over the last few years, and what the heck's going to happen. So we're doing a deep dive into Ontario's housing market at the census division, or essentially county level, for all 49 of Ontario's census divisions. So this is a sneak preview of some research that we're putting out. Oops, let's see if I can. So the first issue is the growing province. If we look over the last 5 years, you can see on the sort of far right of your screen, we've grown by almost 1 million people in Ontario the last 5 years. It actually would have been over 1 million people absent the pandemic. Prior to this, we were growing at about 700,000 people every 5 years, so about 140,000 people a year. And if you go back to Ministry of Finance population forecasts back in 2016, they were predicting more of the same. So we grew by 1 million people, and we weren't really anticipating that. We thought we'd grow by about 700,000. So what the heck happened? Well, what happened was some policy changes that go back to the Harper government and accelerated under the Trudeau government, of an increase in what we call non-permanent residents. And that's a bit of a misnomer, because it's basically international students who come to Ontario, often stay under the postgraduate work permit program, and then gain permanent residency in the province. And that's shown by this big green rectangle in 2016 to 2021. You'll notice is much larger than in previous years. So that's basically what's happened. We've had an influx of a lot of really talented, ambitious 20-somethings, which is fantastic for the province. We just need to figure out how to get the supporting housing and infrastructure in place if we want to continue to attract and retain this talent. And particularly, we need enough of family-friendly homes, because the thing about 20-year-olds is 10 years from now, they're going to be 30-year-olds. And they're going to start to want to raise families and have kids, and we go, okay, well, where are they going to be able to do that? So we've seen, because of this increase in population, an increase in this concept of drive until you qualify, of people in the Toronto area, the GTA, going, I can't afford to continue living here if I want to raise a family. So they get in the car and they go to a nice, family-friendly, climate-friendly community. So if we look at, this is data from Toronto and Peel region. So it used to be every single year on net, about 20 to 25,000 people would leave Toronto and Peel for other parts of the province. It's now, in the last year we have data, and this goes right up to the beginning of the pandemic, so it's not driven by the pandemic. In the last year we have data, we have 60,000 people on net leaving the City of Toronto and Peel region for other parts of the province. And the most common age on net to leave is 0. It's kids under 12 months old. So mom and dad are living in a 600 square foot condo in downtown Toronto or Mississauga. Kids starts crying, go, you know what, this ain't gonna work. I need to have somewhere where I have a little bit of space. There's nice parks, nice schools. So they're going all across the province. The 10 most common ages to leave the City of Toronto and Peel region are 0 to 4 and 31 to 34. That's who's moving across the province. It's young kids and their parents. So, and what's happening is that this is causing the housing shortages and high housing prices to be transmitted across the province. So 5 or 6 years ago, these families were moving to Oshawa, they were moving to Milton. Now they're moving to Barrie, they're moving to Kitchener-Waterloo, they're moving to Woodstock. So it's causing these high housing prices to be transmitted across the province. You're seeing increasing commuting times and distances. You're seeing a lot of communities across Ontario achieve growth that hadn't been really growing for a while. Places like Thorold outside of St. Catharines. So you guys are probably very familiar with this data for Simcoe, Barrie, Orangeville, that you've seen this big population, this migration to the community, essentially go up by about 50% over the last decade, driven by families in search of housing and new housing developments across Simcoe County. And just like you go, okay, well, who's coming? It's the same people as who's leaving Toronto and Peel. It's young children and people in their late 20s, early 30s. So it's not so much driven by retirees, though you do have retirees moving to Simcoe. It's a lot of young families who are in search of housing. So the big question is, okay, what does this mean going forward? What does this mean going forward across the region? So if we look across Ontario, so the last 5 years are on the far left, the Ontario Ministry of Finance says, you know what, we've had enough difficulty trying to figure out how to house 1 million new people every 5 years. Ontario Ministry of Finance says, get used to it. That over the next 5 years, as the international students come back, we're looking at about 1.25 million. After that, they're saying, okay, the growth in international students will scale back, but every 5 years will be growing by over 1 million people or over 200,000 people a year. How are we going to house everyone? This is going to be a big challenge because we're seeing growth rates that historically we hadn't seen in Ontario. People, a lot of international talent wants to come here. That's a fantastic thing for us, but we need to figure out how to support all of that. So if we look at, these are the Ontario Ministry of Finance population forecast for Simcoe, these are actually quite low because these are just sort of local growth. This is not incorporating all the sort of drive until you qualify additional demand. So they're saying even without the additional drive until you qualify demand, you're still going to be growing by about 10,000 people a year going forward every single year, or 50,000 plus every 5 years. Now, what you can do is you can take this data, if you know how old the people are who are coming, you can the age, the sex, you can translate population projections into housing projections. So just the sort of local housing demand, you're looking at, again, across Simcoe, across Barrie, across Orangeville, in the next 5 years, you're looking at about the demand for about 22,000 net new homes. So about 4,000 plus every year. And again, this is not counting the increase in drive until you qualify families from Toronto and Peel. So this is a lot of housing demand. And Barrie's already seen this, but this is going to continue. So Ontario Ministry of Finance says 100,000 new people in the next 10 years. Added up, the housing demand is about 42,000, which again underestimates it because you're not counting the drive until you qualify. The Hempson numbers, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, are saying it's about 122,000 and 58,000 when you count drive until you qualify. We've sort of compared the two. I'm saying these are likely underestimates as well. So the Hempson numbers are, in our view, still underestimating the amount of residual demand that's going to come from Toronto and Peel due to population growth. So what we do is we look at all 49 counties or all 49 census divisions across Ontario and aggregate it all together. And we say that over the next 10 years, we're projecting 910,000 net new households to be formed across Ontario. And then we couple that with the fact that we haven't been building homes fast enough of all types. So this includes apartments, what have you. We're also in the last 5 years short about 65,000 homes. We've got about 65,000 families that should have been formed that weren't because of a lack of housing, people living in their parents' basements, apartments, and things like that. So put those two together and look at a little bit of residual demand that existed before 2016. And we're essentially looking at household demand over the next 10 years of 1 million net new homes across Ontario. We have never, or at least not in my lifetime, and I've got a lot of gray hair, we've never built 1 million net new homes in a 10-year period. So this is the challenge that is for all of us. And again, as somebody at the Smart Prosperity Institute, we do a lot of environmental outcome policy. We're just not looking at how do we build enough homes, but how do we build enough family-friendly, climate-friendly, walkable communities, and so on. How do we avoid issues of sprawl, and excess commuting and that kind of thing when there's so much residual household demand. So my final thoughts are that Ontario's population boom, what we've seen over the last 5 years, it's only going to increase, again, according to the Ministry of Finance. As you know, your big growth destination for drive until you qualify families, all of this demand is getting driven by young families. And we need to economically, we need to make sure that we have the housing available. We're doing a great job attracting talent to the province. Can we retain that? Can we retain that talent? Can we ensure that there's a home, an affordable, attainable home for everyone? And are municipalities prepared for not just the housing demand, but the demands on transit, the demands on parks, schools, amenities, what have you? So that's it. That's, this is not a lot of solutions here, but my view is, the first step is always to admit you have an issue or have a problem. So we're hoping that by putting this data out there, we can get municipalities and the provincial government thinking through, okay, how can we manage this growth in a family-friendly, climate-friendly way? So I will stop the presentation there. I hope I haven't gone over my 10 minutes, and just thank you so much for having me here today.
Mike, thank you so much. Do you have time to answer a few questions from members of council?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, thank you for that. So members of council, are there any questions for Dr. Moffatt? Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, and Dr. Mike Moffatt. Thank you for speaking to council. I know you're a huge expert in different regions, the London region, the Ottawa region, KW. So I appreciate you putting in the slide that Simcoe County is a drive till you qualify location. The blunt reality is homes that were in the low 300s, 400s of all asset classes are now priced in the 600s to 800s in Barrie. That's the reality that we used to look at the GTA and be like, oh, it happens there. It doesn't happen here. It happens once you hit Vaughan, but it's not the reality we face. And the reality is that people my age, in their 20s, people a little bit older in their 30s, or people who might be in their 40s and were just about to finally buy, have been priced out of living here in Barrie. Could you explain how, if so, how are the dynamic forces between the demand for students to be housed? I don't want to call it student housing, but the demands for those students to be housed, how is that connected to the demand for housing for families? Not necessarily single detached families, but families in general, because we had some discussions a few months ago about if there's an opportunity cost between the two, meaning if council through policy somehow supports student housing, it would come at a cost to affordability for families. So I'm wondering if you could speak to are they interconnected, and if so, how are they?
Yeah, so I think they are interconnected in two ways. That first of all, again, your 20-somethings 10 years from now end up staying and becoming 30-somethings and needing family-friendly homes. We're also seeing, and I can speak more to London, that we're seeing a lot of conversions here of family homes, particularly near Fanshawe College, that are getting turned into student rental just because of the demand there. That international enrollments are rising much faster than our ability to build medium and high density housing for students, and as well, oftentimes there's preferences for living living in single detached or townhomes even as a student versus high rise. So they're absolutely connected. They're connected in a direct sense of international students, like the rest of us, need somewhere to live. But also international students end up staying under the postgraduate work permit program, and then end up staying as permanent residents and enrich our communities and end up raising families. And interestingly enough, a lot of those 20-somethings who were saying, okay, they're driving until they qualify at a Toronto and Peel, a lot of them are fairly new Canadians. They went to Ryerson or U of T, ended up as international students, ended up staying and are, love it here, and now are raising a family and moving to a Barrie, a Woodstock, a wherever. So they're absolutely interconnected. And again, I think they're really enriching our communities. I'm very glad that they're here, but we need to make sure that we're able to support them.
Thank you, Dr. Moffatt. How do you recommend that municipalities grapple this in the immediate term? And what I mean by that is obviously the province can make policy changes in terms of zoning, either uploading zoning provisions and policy, or getting aggressive about housing, both for international students, for just people in general. People need to be housed in Ontario, or tweaking that target amount every year. in the short term, how do you recommend a municipality like Barrie, where it's kind of hitting us like cold water in the face, where those home prices are finally catching up and it's a reality here, and our local college doesn't yet have the support from the province to build more purpose-built student housing on campus? I'm not talking so much about the private sector yet, but that's not widespread policy yet around the province. So we're getting into a situation where limited supply there's competition between an influx of residents to Barrie, existing Barrie residents who are now having families, and like you said, something's got to give, especially in what you describe as the Fanshawe College neighborhood, which here in Barrie is the Ward 1 Jordan College area, and it's having kind of a ripple effect. How do you recommend in the short term, until there's more of a top-down approach from the province, that a municipality like Barrie handle that?
Yeah, it's tough. And we specifically don't get into sort of policy recommendations. And it's, there are things you can do on the margins, secondary suites, things like that. But I think, this problem or this issue didn't happen in a day, and we're not going to solve it in a day. So I think a lot of what's going to happen is going to be the advocacy of municipal politicians to the provincial government and saying, hey, we need to do something on student housing. We need to do something on zoning. We need to be able to do something for building medium and high density on transit lines. So it's a tough thing. And everybody who works for me at the Smart Prosperity Institute and my junior researchers, I think the oldest one is about 32 and the youngest is about 23. So they're constantly screaming at me about like, hey, Mike, you got to fix this because we all want to start a family. But yeah, I think, part of it is just we need to admit the seriousness of this issue. And we need to, there are things that we can do and the federal government can do about foreign investors and things like that. But we also have to recognize that while that might affect things on the house, that there is a supply side issue. I think we're getting there. I think we're starting to see the federal parties admit there's a supply side issue in the way that they weren't in 2019. But that's just it, just recognizing, just being able to say, like, look, we've got to build more houses. Yes, we can do things about speculation and things like that, but none of that is going to help. So, please help us here. But yeah, at the local level, again, things like secondary suites. And I really, I don't want to get into sort of your municipal policy. Once I start making things, I'm probably weighing into some landmines I'm not even aware exist. But.
Well, we've got the whole affordable housing zoning bylaw tomorrow. So Mike, we will be knee deep.
I don't want to hear. Well, Professor Moffatt said this, so please keep me out of that one.
Yeah. Sorry, Councilor Morales, did you have, you're good? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilor Jim Harris, question. Oh, sorry, Councilor Congo, you indicated first, then Councilor Jim Harris.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a couple of questions. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Moffatt. When I'm looking at the information on the Smart Prosperity website around the key 2021 initiatives that you have, fantastic. I'll be exploring those. I'm kind of resonating towards a circular economy, knowing our staff have been doing incredible work through GM Andrea Miller, and there's exciting things coming forward. And there's a piece there around valuing and protecting nature tied to, how do we balance development with our environmental assets? I didn't know if you had any recommendations, knowing that, we're moving into a growth pressure. And as we develop, any advice that you have for us around key strategies to balance that demand for development with that environmental approach?
Well, I think it comes to density, and that's one of the things that I'm worried about. I'm worried about a lot of things, and obviously I'm worried about my kids being able to afford a home and things like that. But ultimately, one of the things that sort of keeps me up at night as somebody who runs an environmental think tank is, what are the pressures that this is going to create on the green belts? After a while, we think, and environmentalists think in terms of a lot of social license about development. And, natural infrastructure has its own social license. And if we're not able to build enough housing for young people, they're going to go, well, why don't you just pave over that swamp over there and build us some houses there? So absolutely, this is one of our big concerns. And, ultimately, you can either build out or you can build up. So it's about creating that density, but creating it in a way that's, again, family friendly and climate friendly. That's not just, 60-story high rises, but all these sort of missing middles and all these things that planners and I've heard Mayor Lehman and others talk about. It's that kind of thing, like being able to build these other forms where you have something that's in between sort of, a bunch of single detached homes everywhere, but also not necessarily 60-foot home rises. But I think as well, it comes to sort of valuing nature and recognizing that, the natural ecosystem services that things like wetlands and provides, that if you sort of start to put houses over those, that's going to increase your infrastructure costs on water and flooding and things like that. So it's more just things to consider, but I absolutely agree. That's one of my big concerns in all of this, is that demand for housing, which we absolutely need to meet. It's not just a question of meeting it, but how do we meet it? And how do we make sure that we're not just paving over, we're losing 175 acres of the best farmland in the world every single day to development. That's going to continue to be an issue if we don't address it.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question. It takes a little bit of a different angle. And I guess my next one I'll ask about population. And I'm not sure, Mr. Moffatt, if you're comfortable answering this question, or maybe it's better deferred to staff, but I look at the city of Barrie, we're in the drafting of our next official plan. And we've got growth targets based on population projections. And part of, when I hear, the things that we're seeing and the changes around patterns of where people are moving and migrating to and the impact we're seeing in Barrie, do we need to rethink how we're setting our growth targets? And that there's now this inflated number that we need to actually respect a little bit differently. So, Barrie, I think in our official plan draft, we're still talking about a population of 253,000 and 129,000 jobs by 2041. And I'm wondering if that's a piece you would have an opinion about, whether or not municipalities need to start relooking and adding other considerations around population targets into their plans.
Well, I do think we do need to have a larger conversation about where are people going to live, what communities, so on. I think we've been looking at it for a lot of communities outside of the greater Golden Horseshoe area, which don't sort of fall into the official plan. But I do think this is going to involve sort of provincial leadership of saying, okay, like what should everybody's targets be? Because if these things are decided at just a municipal level, what happens is that essentially nobody builds house. You just get this sort of excess demand where Barrie's not building enough, or Kitchener-Waterloo or Hamilton or Burlington or whoever. There's just excess demand in the system, and then people end up moving to wherever's easier for the homes to get built, not what makes the most sense for the economy or the environment. So I think we need to take a holistic approach. I think it's going to take leadership from the provincial government, and luckily they're listening. So we had a meeting on Friday with Minister Steve Clark and Minister Stan Cho, where we presented this data. So I think they're listening. I think that the province is sort of on board with this and recognizing that if all of these decisions are kind of siloed off, then we're going to continue to have excess demand in the housing market. And these decisions aren't going to be made in the best sort of economic or environment perspective.
Thank you for that. I have one final question, if I may. So I sit on the City of Barrie Seniors Advisory Committee. And when I think about the numbers you presented, I'm making some assumptions, but wondering if you have a comment. If we're looking at the population that we're really seeing is kind of migrating, that 0 to 4 and kind of 26 to 35, my assumption is these are driven individuals that are income earners that can pay more for rental if rental's what's more available and affordable to get into. And what is the ripple effect that having perhaps a generating or an income that retirees might not have on creating extra vulnerability around seniors? So, are we, what are those impact factors? Are you seeing them, or are there considerations you're hearing about around the less affordable opportunities for seniors who might require in later years more access to services, not actually being able to maintain residency in an urban core, where they might be more likely to kind of receive a hub of health services and later life services. So my concern is, we're talking about housing for seniors quite a lot at that table and affordability, and we're already starting to see seniors moving out of the city, or stories of individuals that can't even manage an adjustment to rental increase when a housing changes hands or when rental rates increase. Is there a lens on seniors that you have around this?
So I haven't specifically looked at seniors, but this larger issue of displacement is absolutely happening, and we can kind of see it in the data. So what happened over the last few years? Toronto got expensive, had a housing shortage. Milton starts getting expensive, and people moved to Kitchener-Waterloo. And what's been happening is Kitchener-Waterloo is starting to see an outflow. I don't know specifically about seniors, but a lot of sort of local displacement as rents go up and housing prices go up. So they're moving to Brantford, and then Brantford's getting expensive. And, in order to live in Brantford, you need to earn a Kitchener-Waterloo wage, which tends to be higher than a Brantford wage. Rents are going up in Brantford, prices are going up to Brantford, and they're moving to Tillsonburg. So you're seeing this displacement. We call it the musical chairs effect, where, people, it's like, okay, I lost my chair in Toronto, so I'm moving to Kitchener-Waterloo, and then I sold the Kitchener-Waterloo seat, and they're moving to Brantford. So I haven't specifically looked at seniors, but I would be shocked if it's not happening to them, because you're absolutely right that there is this displacement going on, where you're seeing, you're seeing an inflow into a city from a higher price city, but then an outflow of the population to a lower price city. And we're seeing it. I'm more familiar with the data southwest of Toronto, just because that's where I'm from. But that is absolutely happening. And it's something I think we all need to be aware of.
Thank you. I can tell you I'm from a small town in Norwich, so we're seeing the Woodstock-Tillsonburg effect, right, in the rural areas and farming areas. But I really appreciate your time. Thank you again, Councillor Morales, for facilitating this presentation.
Thanks, Councillor Congo. Councillor Jim Harris.
Thank you, Arlene. And I was really looking for a Dr. Mike Moffatt said moment, but for tomorrow night. But barring exclusion, I'll move on to something else. Dr. Moffatt, I appreciate your presentation. On slide 3, I couldn't help but notice 30 years ago in 1991, the net population growth for that period was the only one larger than this last 5 years. So I'm wondering, with that noted, it has the biggest number of net non-permanent residents from any other 5-year period, not as much as the last 5 years. Just curious, what, if anything, was learned from that a period of time 30 years ago as it relates to housing builds, and what can we apply to this last 5 years of population growth, immigration, and housing shortage?
So I'm actually kind of worried about the opposite, where we're trying to apply the lessons from 30 years ago that no longer apply here. So the difference 30 years ago, and this is very important, that it's not just how much the population is growing, but how the population is growing. So back in the late 1980s and early 1990s, we had a baby boom. We had the echo, I think David Foote at U of T called it. So that doesn't actually affect housing demand all that much. Like if I have a child and then I have a second child, Ontario's population goes up, but that really doesn't affect the overall housing demand, right? Because it's, I've gone from a 3-person household to a 4-person household, but I'm still living in the same house. So I think, and that's kind of, I think can lull us into a false sense of security, saying, well, we had population growth in the 80s and we were able to manage that. But there were two big differences. That first, a lot of that was a baby boom rather than changes in the non-permanent residents. And the second thing that was different is we built a lot more homes back then. Arguably, and I think many people on this call will remember this, we built so many homes that we had a house price crash in about 1990, right? That we are not in risk of doing that. Our population growth over the last 5 years is about 60% higher than the previous year, 5 years. I think our overall home building growth is about 15% higher. And that's actually mostly like 1- and 2-bedroom apartments rather than larger family homes. So I would say that, yes, we have been through similar at a quantity level population growth, but the type of population growth was different, and the way that we responded to it in home building was different. So that's, good lessons going forward. I do think, going back to the question of seniors, one of the ways that we can deal with it is building more purpose-built rentals and seniors-friendly communities, close to where people live. That might actually help unlock some of the family-friendly homes. So I am at my parents' house right now. I'm visiting them in London, Ontario, and they have threatened to move out of this house for about the last 15 years. They're in their mid-70s, and they never go. And they never go because they look around and go, there's no alternative, right? If we were building those alternatives in the community, maybe they move out and they could, then some younger family would move in here. So I think there are things like that we can do and start to say, okay, this is, if we want to increase the number of young families in homes, that doesn't necessarily necessitate building more homes for families. It could be creating options for seniors to go, you know what, I don't, my parents are here, there's two of them, this is a 4-bedroom house, but they're like, you know what, we like the neighborhood, we don't want to leave, so we're going to stay. Well, if there was more options in this neighborhood, maybe they would move out. They've threatened to every year since about 2004, and they've never gone, and I don't think they ever will, but they keep looking into it every single year.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Moffatt. I was thinking those folks in the blue, the other, which you described as the baby boom of that area, they would be house buyers in the 2016, 2021 area, right? So the perfect storm when you've got more non-permanent residents, more immigration, plus the aging of all that boom from 25, 30 years ago is now in the housing market at the same time as.
Yeah, and that's a lot of that's absolutely a lot of what's going on. That those people who were born in 1988 or so, they're starting to have families, and it's changing the types of housing forms that they want. So that is absolutely happening. It is a bit of a perfect storm.
And maybe last question: is there any correlation between enrollment rates? Are enrollment rates up at college universities? Or is it just the fact that non-permanent resident status is a good way to keep talent and to a good path to citizenship? Are we getting that many more students, or is it just the more students are staying?
Yeah, so we are getting more students now. There is on the college side, and interestingly enough, a lot of this is driven more by the college side than the university side. That's where actually you're seeing the big enrollment increases. You are seeing somewhat of a decline in domestic enrollment, but is more than made up for in international enrollment. And there's a couple of things that are driving that. One is just a policy change. So basically, going back the last few years, the federal government has outsourced a lot of the immigration system to the colleges and universities. And I actually think that makes a lot of sense. We all know that one of the issues that we've always had in Canada is that employers have trouble valuing foreign credentials. Right. So instead, and again, this goes back to the Harper government, it said, okay, well, instead of having people immigrate, come over to Canada for the first time at 25 and 26, 27, and have a degree and diploma from some college or university we've never heard of, have them come over at 18, do a college diploma or degree here. Then your employers will know, that degree is worth, and you'd be able to better integrate them into Canadian economic society. And so I think that makes a lot of sense. And then part of it is actually just a Trump effect, that we got really good during the Trump years. Our colleges and universities got really good at recruiting international students because they either weren't able to or didn't want to go to the United States. So places like, again, I'm speaking of London, places like Western and Fanshawe were really able to attract a caliber of student that they weren't able to in the Trump years. And I think that's going to continue. We've got a regime change, obviously, in the United States, but you get this sort of diaspora effect happening of like, okay, well, my cousin went to Western and now lives in London and is doing really well, so now I'm going to attend. So we're seeing that, we're starting, and I teach at Western, and I'm teaching, the little brothers and little sisters and cousins of international students I taught 5 years ago. and they're often, staying in London. So I think this is going to happen, but a lot of it is this combination of policy changes that were made at the federal government, plus things like the election of President Trump that were essentially out of our control, but colleges and universities saw that as an opportunity to increase enrollments and be able to keep people like me on payroll. So yeah, I'm kind of, I'm not totally disinterested in this.
Great. Thank you for your time and for your answers. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike, and we want to be respectful of your time. Any other questions for Dr. Moffatt? If not, I'm going to make him try and speculate one more time on solutions at the end here. Mike, I guess the question that I would have is, does the data tell us anything about the willingness of these young families to accept what we'd call those sort of missing middle densities as a market preference or alternative? So if you drive till you qualify, when you say that, I think you mean drive till you qualify for a mortgage that will support, generally a single detached home, maybe a semi, something with a backyard. Will they accept something without a backyard, or will they accept something with a small backyard like a stacked townhouse? What's the data tell us about market preferences in terms of their demand for built form?
Yeah, it's tough to say. I mean, we haven't really seen that demand, and right now we have so much excess demand that people are willing to take what they can get. Again, I would suggest that there are multiple alternatives. Like, part of it may be building those homes that the younger people want, but part of it may be also just unlocking the single family homes that exist and are being lived in by my parents in their mid 70s. So there's a combination of things, and that allows for creative solutions. That is not necessarily having to build more homes for the 30-somethings, but it might be, building better walkable seniors communities for your older residents, which would then sort of unlock those single family homes. But I think ultimately, we just need to build this stuff, and we need to have more, 3 and 4 bedroom type places, more sort of walkable communities. And I think, I think there are solutions here. And I don't think we're with Councilor Morales said with prices so high, I don't feel like people are overly picky right now. They're just looking for a place they can afford, safe streets, good schools, that kind of thing. And if that gets built, I think, millennials will be quite happy.
Well, thank you very much for being here tonight. Thank you for showing us your parents' dining room set behind you, which was a bit of a giveaway. But anyway, we really do appreciate you being here and giving us a sort of look behind what's going on. I mean, housing is probably the top issue. I would say absolutely the top issue actually at the moment in the city of Barrie. Our numbers, both the demand side, growth, and the supply side shortages have led to incredibly high rents and a very, very steep increase in housing prices. And council is determined to try and assist as best we can, even if the answers, as you do say, may take many years. We have to get started now with some new thinking. And this gives us a bit of a better sense as to what people are looking for and what the drivers are on that demand side, especially the student international migration piece. And the young families. So thank you for that. It's very timely and much appreciated. And we'll let you get to election coverage.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Moffatt. Thank you. Okay, members of Barrie City Council, that brings us to inquiries. Deputy Mayor Ward, do you have any inquiries?
I have none.
Members of council, any inquiries of staff? Okay, I have none. Deputy Mayor Ward, any announcements?
I have none.
Members of council, Councilor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Just one quick announcement. Cleanup Barrie has a community cleanup coming up this Thursday. That's September 23rd at Milligan's Pond. It's a partnership with Simcoe County Alliance and Homelessness Barrie chapter. So that's from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. and residents can find the link to that event page on my website, keenan.ca. Again, that's this Thursday, September 23rd from 3 to 4 in the afternoon at Milligan's Pond. And we're meeting at the dead end of Boyce Street near the pond. Hope to see you there.
Thank you very much, Councilor Owen. Any other announcements, members of council? Councillor Kungle.
Thank you, Your Worship. Quick announcement for those and part of a shout out to staff. So we've been trying to leverage the Pink Street app by residents to help with some graffiti that we're seeing to get serviced and cleaned up in Ward 3. That app was unavailable for the past couple of days. I did want to shout out that while we were seeing an interesting uptake in resident use around this tool, to Ryan and Sherry Harris and the team for investigating what was happening and assisting to get that back online. So it was available through the App Store. So again, Pink Street, a free app, pretty incredible tool, and it helps to expedite some service requests right to the team. So for those that are not using it, please explore it. But a big shout out to staff. I think I submitted a request for a bus stop garbage can in the Tall Trees area, and within less than 2 days that had been serviced and cleaned up. It is noticed by residents. I'm getting lots of compliments. So thank you to the team there. And for those that are looking to expedite some of those service requests, use the app or use Service Berry. But there's some good things happening. So again, thank you to staff for helping us leverage that tool. And my last announcement is just a shout out to residents on Arch Brown. We are looking at some improvements and opportunities around that waterway between Stanley and the East Bayfield Community Center there. If this is an area of interest to you, I've met with and connected with some residents, but between 2 Arch Brown to 16 Arch Brown, we are looking at coming out with Constable Kira Brooks, who's a community safety and wellbeing officer. Council will see, I believe, a motion at next week's general committee meeting that ties to this. But do reach out to me if you haven't connected and want to join in the meeting. We're going to meet on Wednesday at 5 p.m. At the intersection of Arch Brown and Stanley. And that's everything for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Kungle. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Your Worship. As your representative on the Nottawasaga Conservation Authority, I'd just like to provide an announcement on behalf of the Conservation Board that the NVCA is now looking for landowners and volunteers that are interested in tree planting projects that want to get involved in greening the Nottawasaga watershed this spring by planting trees. Every year, the NVCA provides grants to help landowners plant between 100,000 and 250,000 trees to help restore the watershed. NVCA is now looking for interested landowners and volunteers to help plant trees for the spring of 2022. To be eligible, projects must include over 100 trees to be planted, 3 to 5 meters apart. Grants range from between 50 up to 100%, up to a maximum of $1,000 for eligible plantings. Special funding is also available for areas along streams and wetlands and windbreaks. For properties that are over 2.5 acres, the NVCA's forestry staff also offers large-scale tree planting services. The best time to plant trees is in the spring to ensure a good selection of species. The NVCA recommends reserving trees early in the fall before the year that they are planted. Depending on the size of the project, trees can be planted by the landowner, or NVCA staff can help arrange a volunteer group to assist for a great day of planting. And obviously, most of the properties that would be within Barrie's part of the watershed probably wouldn't qualify due to the number. However, we do have a lot of neighboring communities, literally just on the other side of 27 on my ward, that would definitely qualify for this.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of places around the city that could be great candidates, and people will be interested in that potential. So thank you for that. Are there other announcements, members of council? Okay, as we're not being broadcast tonight, I'm going to forego announcements tonight. I think we will save those for next week when we're back on Rogers. And with that, I believe we have completed our agenda, unless there's anything else.
Bylaws.
Bylaws, yeah. Sorry, Deputy Mayor. No, there's nothing here I need to. There's nothing here I need to announce tonight. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Ward.
Okay, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that leave be granted to introduce the following bills, and these bills be read a first, second, third time this day and finally passed. Bill 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, and 81.
Thank you. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that leave be granted to introduce the following bills, and these bills be read a first, second, and third time this day and finally passed. Bills 74 through 81. Comments or questions on the bylaws? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Any opposed? None. That carries, and I would note that adds Evergreen Terrace to the street name list. Deputy Mayor Ward, go ahead.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that leave be granted to introduce the following bill, and this bill be read a first, second, and third time this day and finally passed. Bill 82.
Thank you. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that leave be granted to introduce the following bill, and this bill be read a first, second, and third time this day and finally 82, the confirmation bylaw. Comments or questions? Seeing none, those in favor of Bill 82. Is anyone opposed? None. That carries. Can I have a motion to adjourn tonight's council meeting, please? Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Kungle. We are adjourned, and we will see you tomorrow night, 6 o'clock for City Building Committee, 7 o'clock for Planning Committee, and lots of housing stuff on the agenda tomorrow night. But for tonight, good night. Enjoy watching the election results. Good night, everyone.